I'm not going to pretend this is the best thing ever or try to sell you a fantasy. I'm here because buying a TV and soundbar together can feel like a gamble. You're hoping the picture lives up to the hype, the audio actually makes a difference, and you don't end up with a set that looks great on paper but falls flat in your living room. If you're on the fence about whether a 48-inch OLED paired with Samsung's new Q Series 3.1.2 soundbar is worth the spend, this is the honest rundown you need. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about why a 48-inch OLED might even be on your radar. OLED panels are famous for perfect blacks and almost infinite contrast, which means movies, series, and games can look more lifelike. The S90F brings Samsung's latest 4K AI processor into the mix, promising to upscale anything you throw at it to near-native 4K quality. That sounds impressive, but the real question is whether it actually cleans up the grainy streams we all end up watching on Netflix or Hulu. In practice, the upscaling does a decent job. High-frequency details get a noticeable boost, especially on older 1080p content, and the AI-driven tone mapping keeps bright scenes from blowing out while preserving highlight detail. If you mostly watch native 4K or 4K HDR material, you'll barely notice the difference, but for the occasional 1080p movie night, the processor does make the picture feel sharper without adding artificial edge enhancement that can look garish. Now, onto the audio side. The HWQS700F soundbar is marketed as big bass in a small package. It's a 3.1.2 system, which means 3 front speakers, a dedicated center channel for dialogue, 2 upfiring drivers for height effects, and a wireless subwoofer. What matters most in a real living room is how well the dialogue sits on top of the rest of the mix. In my testing, the center channel was clear enough to hear every word in a crowded action sequence without cranking the volume. That's a direct benefit of Samsung's TV calibration. When you first set it up, the TV listens to the room and adjusts the soundbar's EQ accordingly. In a typical 12-foot by 15-foot space, the calibration left the mids crisp and the highs airy, which is exactly what you want for sitcoms or news shows where speech is the star. Bass performance is where the subwoofer's design shows its limits. The unit is compact, about the size of a small speaker stand, so it won't dominate your furniture layout, but that also means it can't fill a large open-plan room with deep, room-shaking low end. In a modest bedroom or a dedicated media nook, the sub adds a pleasant rumble that you can feel without it becoming a booming nuisance. In a bigger living room, you'll notice the bass starts to thin out after the first few seconds of a low-frequency track. The sub simply can't move enough air to keep the impact consistent. If you're a hardcore bass enthusiast who wants to feel the floor shake during explosions, you'll probably need a larger sub or an additional rear speaker. Surround effect is another point of interest. The 2 upward-firing drivers are meant to bounce sound off the ceiling and create a sense of height. In a room with a low ceiling, under 8 feet, the effect is subtle, more like a gentle ambience than a full-blown 3D soundstage. In a room with a higher ceiling and a bit of acoustic softness, you start to pick up the sense of overhead cues during a sci-fi scene or a sports broadcast, making the experience feel more immersive than a plain stereo pair. It's not a true Dolby Atmos setup with dedicated rear speakers, but it does give you an upgrade over most built-in TV speakers. Connectivity-wise, the soundbar offers HDMI, ARC, optical, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. If you already have a gaming console or a streaming box, hooking it up via eARC means you get a single cable solution for both video and high-quality audio. I found the Bluetooth pairing to be hit or miss. The first attempt took a few seconds longer than I'd like, but once connected, the signal stayed stable. One practical thing to note: the remote for the soundbar is separate from the TV remote, but Samsung's One Remote can control both if you enable the feature in the settings. It took a few minutes to set up, but after that the friction disappears. You can mute the TV and adjust the soundbar volume with the same handset. Let's talk about the everyday moments that matter. Imagine a weekend binge of a dialogue-heavy drama. With the TV's built-in speakers, you'd be leaning forward, squinting at subtitles, trying to catch every nuance. Pairing it with the QS700F, the center channel lifts the voices, and the sub provides just enough low-frequency warmth to keep the sound full without overwhelming the conversation. For sports fans, the smooth motion claim holds up. The AI processor's motion enhancement reduces blur during fast pans, and the soundbar's upfiring drivers help separate crowd noise from the commentary, making it easier to